Hi, I thought I would read to you from a different place today. So, the boys start the war, chapter 5, peace offering. So, remember, yesterday, Wally and Caroline were in the same class, and Caroline sits right behind Wally, and she teased him a little bit by telling him that a spider was coming down on his head, and the teacher was not happy because Wally kind of shrieked out. And so they had Caroline and Wally um, had to stay after school as a punishment kind of thing. And Caroline and Wally and Caroline talked, and he said that the war has started, that he's starting the war. So, which goes with our title, right? And that Beth and Eddie also had bad run-ins with Wally's brothers, and so they had a bad day at school. This is chapter 5, and it's called Peace Offering. Peter, Josh, and Jake were waiting in the bushes when Wally came around the bend. "What happened?" asked Jake. "The Malloys just stomped by, mad as anything." Wally was miserable. "I just declared war," he said, and he told them what had happened. "Oh boy," Josh whistled. "Wow," said Peter. For the rest of the way home, Jake and Josh talked about what they would do if the Malloys tried to get even with Wally for bumping Caroline's nose. They were in the same class as Eddie. "That Eddie would try anything," said Jake. If she'd dump her tray on me in front of the teachers and everybody, you can imagine what she'd do when no one was looking." "Did you watch her pitch at recess? Whomp! The ball comes at you before you can even look at it cross-eyed," Josh went on. "Who's the other sister?" Peter asked, walking fast to keep up. "Beth," Josh told him. "She's weird. Sits on the steps at recess and reads a book." "A whomper, a weirdo, and a crazy," said Jake and sighed. "I wondered how the Benson guys are doing down in Georgia. I bet they miss us like anything." When they reached the house, Wally took a box of crackers up to his room and sat on the floor to eat them, his back against his bed. He still couldn't believe that he was the one who had officially declared war on the Malloys. How had it happened? Only a week before he was lying on his back in the grass, and now here he was, number one on their most wanted list. He was on bad terms already with his teacher, had almost broken Caroline's nose, and had made everything worse by calling her sisters stupid. Well, they were stupid. And deep down, 7 layers beneath his skin, Wally knew he was glad he had thrust his head back and bumped Caroline. He just wanted her to stop bugging him, that's all. But her nose sure looked peculiar by the end of the day, a lot redder and fatter than it had looked like in the morning. Then he had another thought. What if it really was broken? She'd have to have an operation, and he'd have to pay for it? His hands began to sweat, and he swallowed a piece of cracker in his mouth without chewing. Was there such a thing as a sprained nose? A bruised nose? A slightly but not completely fractured nose? A bent nose, maybe? Peter came into Wally's room and sat down beside him on the rug. "What are we going to do next?" he asked excitedly, helping himself to a cracker. He rested one hand on Wally's leg, looking up at his older brother. What Wally wanted to do, in fact, was sit on the rug for the rest of his natural life and never have to face the Malloys again. "You're the general," said Peter. "Huh?" "That's what Josh said. He said you're the one who declared war, so you've got to call the shots." "That's what he said, all right." Wally gave a low moan. "What I think we should do," said Peter, "is dig a large hole and cover it with leaves and sticks. And when Caroline and her sisters walk across it, they fall in, and we keep them trapped forever." "Go out and play, Peter," Wally told him. The boys were strangely quiet when their father came home from his mail route about 4. Jake was planning strategies in his notebook. Josh was drawing a picture of Eddie dropping her tray on Jake, just for the record. And Peter was building a pit out of toothpicks, then running a matchbox car over it and watching the car tumble in. Wally was looking out the window, wondering how far he could get if he climbed on the first Greyhound through town. Mr. Hatford took off his cap, went to the kitchen for a Mountain Dew, and he leaned against the doorway and looked at the boys. "You'll be interested to know that the Malloy girls are Eddie, Beth, and Caroline." "Tell me about it," Jake mumbled. "The way their mother described them, they sound like 3 live wires to me." "Crossed wires is more like it," said Josh. "Short, Circuits, said Wally. A whomper, a weirdo, and a crazy, Peter repeated. Mr. Hatford frowned. You boys can either make yourself miserable by wishing the Bensons were back, which they're not, or you can enjoy a great September day, which it is, and I, for one, aim to enjoy the day. He took his soft drink out onto the side porch along with the paper. Jake looked at Josh. I'll bet they'll spread it all over town how they tricked us. Everyone will be laughing. You know what we could do, don't you? Said Josh. Totally ignore them. Freeze them out. Not even give them the time of day. If we see them coming, we could just turn and walk the other way, said Peter. We can't, said Jake. Wally declared war. Oh, yeah, right, said Josh. Oh boy, said Wally. The hardware store was open till 9 most evenings, and this was Mrs. Hatford's night to work. When she popped in about 6 to make dinner, she said, Boys, I've got a job for you. I baked a cake for this morning before work, frosted it at noon, and I want you to take it over to the Malloys right now so they can have some with their supper. Wally stared at his mother as though she had just grown another head. Well, don't look so astonished, she said, coming out of the kitchen with a large square box. It's the traditional way to greet a new family in the neighborhood. You know, the Bensons did it for us the first week we moved in, and I'll never forget how good that cake tasted after unpacking all day. But, Wally began, just hand it to whoever answers the door, tell them it's from the Hatfords, and say, Welcome to Buckman. That's all you have to say. Then come right home because dinner's almost ready. Could we just leave it on their porch? Wally asked. Wallace Hartford, you certainly may not, his mother scolded. A dog could get into it. There might be rain. All sorts of things could happen. What's the matter with saying a few cordial words to a new family? Hurry up now. Who's going to take it over? Wally looked at Jake, who was looking at Josh, and then they all turned towards Peter. Peter is not going over there alone. This is a 3-layered chocolate chiffon with whipped cream icing. I worked at a total of 2 hours and set it on the plate I got from Aunt Ida at Christmas time. I want to make sure it gets there in one piece. You can all go. Hold this box steady now, she instructed, thrusting it in Wally's hands. If the cake slides around, the icing will come off on the sides of the box. Tell them there's no hurry about returning the plate. Wally and his brothers moved down the front steps as though they were headed to a funeral, and Wally carried the remains of the deceased in the box. This can't be happening, he said to himself, but it was. After half breaking Caroline's nose, this would look as though he were saying he was sorry. He was not sorry, and now he was mad as anything. If Caroline comes to the door, Wally, let her have it, said Jake. Swish, right in the schnoz. It'll be worth the whipping we get when we get home. Said Josh. Dad'll march us right back over here and make us apologize, and that would be worse. You take it, Wally said, holding the box out towards Jake. Eddie dropped her tray on you in the cafeteria. You could drop this on her. We'd just say we are getting even. No way. I'd still have to apologize, and I'm not about to apologize to Eddie Malloy if someone burned my feet with hot irons. Wow, said Peter, impressed. They walked down the sidewalk, crossed the road, and started along the bank toward the swinging footbridge. I know what we can do today, Wally said at last. We could creep over to their front porch, set the cake in front of the door, and then ring the bell and run. That way we wouldn't have to say anything at all. If we can get over there without them seeing us, said Josh. Here's what we'll do, Jake told them. Once we get across the bridge, we'll stay off Island Avenue and keep to the bushes along the river. When we get opposite their house, we'll put the cake on the porch and when no one is watching. This isn't any fun, grumbled Peter. I thought this was war. Just a temporary ceasefire, Jake assured him. The boys had just stepped onto the swinging bridge and started across when Wally's heart almost stopped beating, for coming down the hill on the other side were the 3 Malloy sisters, and a moment later they too were on the bridge. For a moment everybody stopped, the Hatfords at one end, the Malloys at the other. Now what? Whispered Wally. They're trying to block us, said Jake. Just keep going. If they want to fight, they'll get it. The boys started moving forward again, and the girls started moving forward too. The swinging bridge bounced and jiggled as the two groups came toward each other. Wally held on to the cable with one hand, the cake with the other. He'd never fought a girl in his life. None of his brothers had either, and he knew that for all of Jake's talk, they wouldn't begin now. This was a different kind of battle, a war of the wits. But what if the girls didn't see it that way? What if the Malloys got out in the middle of the bridge and trashed them? Could they fight back? The Hatford brothers hadn't fallen into a single file had fallen into a single file as they approached the middle of the bridge. You always did that when you met someone coming toward you, always said hello and moved over to make room. The Malloy girls, however, came in a row. "The first one who tries anything gets a cake right in the puss," Jake whispered in Wally's ear. The next thing Wally knew, he was face to face with Caroline Malloy, face to nose anyway, for her swollen nose seemed to take up half her face. It had also turned black and blue. He realized suddenly if he just gave the girls the cake, he wouldn't have to walk all the way over to their house. He wouldn't have to ring the doorbell and say nice things to the parents. He wouldn't have to fight the girls to get on across either. "Here," he said, holding the box out in front of him. "It's a cake." Caroline stared at him, then at her sisters. "It's a cake," Wally said again. "It's for you." "Yeah?" said Eddie. "I'll just bet," said Beth. "What dead animal did you dream up this time?" Suddenly, Caroline grabbed the box out of Wally's hand and in one swift toss flung it over the side of the bridge. Wally and his brothers stared in astonishment as Mother's three-layered chocolate chiffon spilled out into the water, the two top layers heading in different directions. The box, with the bottom layer still in it, bobbed up and down in the current, and then the whipped cream frosting, like foam, floated downstream. Okay, so I did this in the sun, and now I can't see where to stop. I'm going to carry you guys, but just forget this part. That was chapter 5. I'm interested to find out what happened to the mother's plate. Remember, it was a Christmas gift. Okay. I have to get you in the shadows so I can tell where to stop, where to press stop.